Okay, so session 1, self-transformation course, and it's our introductory session. So let's get underway. Okay, so what we're going to cover in our course is essentially the philosophy and practice of yoga, philosophy and practice of yajna, which is sacrifice, and dharma, but also Buddha yoga, which is a combination of karma yoga, jnana yoga, dhyana yoga, which is meditation, and bhakti yoga, which is devotional love. So they're based on 3 texts by my teacher, Ravi Ravindra. And it's one, which is the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. This is a library copy. Oh no, this is my copy. We've got a copy in the library. Bhagavad Gita, which is Ravi's, put this out in 2017. Now, we don't have a copy in the library. I had ordered one. I thought it would be here by now, but apparently the website that I ordered it on has gone under and I didn't get my money back. I found out a few days ago. I have to order another one from another website. So I want to get a copy for the library. So there's that translation, and also the Yoga of the Christ, which is the Gospel of John, his commentary on that. So it's quite good in the sense that you've got one author, one, science, he's a physicist and religious studies and philosopher, scholar. He's written many books, and it's great that he can bring all the traditions from the East and the West together. I'll try and do that in my humble way, because there's a lot of crossovers and parallels, which is kind of cool, touch on those. So I'm not going to go, in a sense, we're not going to go through each kind of chapter and line it up. I'll kind of do a little bit of that, but more so looking at the key themes from each of the texts, because not everything's going to line up exactly, but the common threads are there, which is nice. Okay. And that's a picture of me and Ravi last year in April when he came. He's 85, so if you ever see him online and stuff, do catch him. But he's got lots of other good stuff there online as well. And he's, quite conscious that he could part the earth at any time. And I think he's ready for it as well. But he's still sharp as a tack. And his teacher, Madame de Salzman, looked at as well. She lived to 101. So he, when she met him, he was around like mid-50s. And she said, "You're young, you'll be fine." And she worked to 101. So he's carrying on the service. Okay. So our purpose is, there's something in us, or something that is us, that is wanting to evolve, this absolute. And there's a quote there from the Rig Veda in terms of, all humans, all of us are sitting there, on a nice starry night, you're out in the bush or something, look up and it's like, what, does it all mean? So we've all been asking this question. And Ravi, who said, he's a physicist, he said, well, there's about 2 trillion galaxies, and we're just in an ordinary one. And ourselves, compared to all that as a human being, why are we created? Why are we so special? Because we are here amongst this vast cosmos. So, and it's like, it's that sense of sacredness. He says, we don't breathe, rather we are being breathed. And there's this one consciousness, if you like, that we're all part of, and is in us. We're all sold in it. It's omnipresent. So it's just breathing us. It's part of us. So it's that sense of that sacredness that, we're here, but we don't want to take ourselves too important, and yet we're also important. So this where it relates to the uniqueness in manifestation and oneness. So human beings are self-conscious, we're unique, and yet, we're part of something larger. And that saying in the middle, "a free being limited itself that may exist," was from a member of the Indian section at the World Congress in 2001 in Sydney that I attended. I was, younger, and I never forgot it. He did a short talk. I can't remember the rest of the talk, but I remember that's what he started with. And that was the first thing he said: "Free being limited itself that may exist." So it's like that being didn't have to do anything, and yet through us, it's experiencing, it's evolving, it's doing something, and yet it didn't really need to. So, yeah, we're part of something kind of wonderful. And Sushma, she blew my mind a little bit when she said, in terms of manifestation, she said, God is God when God is not God. So when the one brings itself here, it is God. At the same time, it's not God. So, it doesn't have to do anything, yet it does something. And yeah, so, sorry? Oh, right. Oh, the Sufi saying, yeah. So this is, ultimately comes down to what it all means. If we die before we die, we do not die when we die. So it's about essentially, there's the me, there's the little I, if you like, and there's the big I, the one. If we identify with the body, which is what we're going to get through in this course, because all of the sages are saying we are the problem because we think we're separate to everything else. But if we live a life where we can die to ourselves on a daily basis, our desires, our wants, and all the rest of it, then it's not going to be such an issue when the body actually does die. So that's kind of Sufi saying I put here. So in a sense, it's like, Bill said to me years ago about Jeffrey Hodgson, he said there's a movement from unconscious to conscious perfection. Like we just don't know who we are, but we already are divine and we don't know it. So we're doing the work, and it's part of the incarnation, which we'll get to right now. So the Gospel of John at the start, there's this prayer, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So in this sense, what it's getting at, Ravi is suggesting that this intelligence has been incarnated in us. This one has taken on a body, and it's in us, and is up to us to undergo a radical change, which is metanoia, which is a word from the Bible, which is literally understood, or commonly understood as repentance, but it actually means a radical reorientation, 180-degree turnaround. Basically, obeying God's commandments against oneself. Because all throughout the gospel, Jesus is training the disciples to follow his commandments and do his will as he does the Father's will. So it's a radical reorientation of how we're actually living. And Meister Eckhart said, a Christian is called to be Mary and to give birth to the Word. So this intelligence, a new beginning, and awareness, as opposed to the literal interpretation. And this is where our work is done. We die tomorrow, that's it. Whatever we've done here is going to see us in good stead. There's not much you can really do on the other side because it all corresponds to what we do here. So this is where it actually is. Incarnation is very, very important. So it's about a change in consciousness, moving to a different level. Now, also in the Gospel in chapter 9, there's a story about a fellow who's born blind. I'll get to it in a moment, but essentially it's symbolic that we're all spiritually blind. Humans are born ignorant, and this is in the Indic tradition, Indian tradition, and Patanjali and the Bhagavad Gita. It's all the fact that we're all ignorant. Human beings are ignorant of their true nature. They don't know who they are. We don't know who we are. So the story in the gospel, so Jesus comes across this fellow who's been born blind, but he's aware of his blindness. He's got some degree of inner awakening. So the Christ comes before him and anoints him, and he's able to see because he's ready to wake up. So it's quite interesting because the Pharisees, the religious governing council, the Sanhedrin, are ruling the roost and they're following Christ around because he's starting to rock the boat a bit with his teaching. And they question this man because he was known to be blind and now he can see, and they're saying, well, how can you, how did all this happen? And he's saying, well, this fellow Jesus did it to me. And they don't know where Jesus comes from because he's coming from a much deeper or higher level, which the Pharisees are not even at that level. So they can't really understand. But the blind man who's had some insight and is, got to a certain degree of awakening and is joined with Christ is quite amazed because he can't understand how the religious scholars don't understand or see what he's seeing from direct experience because they know all the theory, but they don't know the practice. So it's quite interesting in terms of Ravi talks about authority based on awareness and realization, who speak from your own experience, versus the authorities who are speaking from the scriptures and the rules and regulations. So this kind of theme between awakening and the rules and the regulations, which is what the disciples have to deal with, is all through the Gospel of John. For example, Nicodemus, who was a member of the Sanhedrin Council, he used to go and see Christ in the nighttime and get instruction from him. But he didn't have enough gumption to go out on his own like the disciples and leave behind all the social trappings that he had with the religious council. But he, when they voted to crucify Christ, there were few of them like Nicodemus who voted not to do that. And the majority did, not all of them did. So there's this kind of, if you like, all through some of the stories and the parables in the gospel, degrees of awakening, even within the disciples, which is kind of interesting. And obviously the Buddha, we're all asleep and he's awake. So what is also interesting then is the relationship between spirit and matter. And through all the texts, Ravi is emphasizing in his commentaries, there is a core relationship between spirit and matter. You can't just sit up in the Himalayas and forget your body. We actually have to work in the world and engage in action that will enable us to do some good, but do it from a place where we're connected with the one. So there's a saying from the Indian sage Prakriti, which is, matter, without spirit is blind, and Purusha without Prakriti is lame. And Ravi himself said, without God it cannot be done, without humans it will not be done. So this is Ravi's teacher, Madame de Salzmann, who died at 101. And she made the same argument in terms of that relationship between humans and their role to be able to bring down this energy to make the earth a better place, which is essentially what we're doing here. And I'll just I'll read a quote from Madame de Salzmann. It's quite good. The body is necessary, but it is not the most important thing. It must obey something else. In fact, the body wants and likes the contact with the energy which comes from above, which comes from God, but we are taken by automatism. One must liberate the subtle body from the prison of habits of ordinary life. The important thing is the real I, that's a capital I, which is independent of the physical body. But the body is very necessary because the higher energy needs the body in order to manifest itself. The body is needed so that the I can have an action. That I can create a new body if the connection is strong enough, that is to say, if one permits the higher energy to pass into me. The conscious response or attention which arises from the me, which is personal, serves as a thread for connecting the I and the me. And the I is not personal. I can awaken me and serve Earth. And the Earth as a whole has a need of more conscious energy. And this was, Gurdjieff, who's Madame Salzmann's teacher, and she took after teaching when Gurdjieff died. This is the whole point he was making. And Ali talked about this in her presentation a few weeks ago, that it's all about conscious living, being conscious. And there's a Japanese proverb, vision without action is a dream, action without vision is a nightmare. So there's that relationship that we need to be aware of. Vision without action is a dream, action without vision is a nightmare. Okay, without man, the earth cannot receive the energy from a higher level. So if some people work consciously, they assist the descent of this energy. Otherwise, there is discord on the earth, one can sense it. So again, because there's this relationship between spirit and matter in our spiritual practice, we're not actually undertaking anything unnatural. What we're doing is attempting a spiritual practice a little bit faster. And as such, St. Paul is saying our fight is not against human foes, but against cosmic powers, against those authorities and potentates of the stark world, against the superhuman forces of evil in the heaven. So we could, for example, wait till the end of the whole cycle of manifestation, which is 4,320,000,000 years, and we would be awake. Now, C.W. Leadbeater, he talked about this in the Christian context, and he said, talks about no cross, no crown, to sacrifice yourself to get your crown. And he said, well, you could wait till the end of the cycle and have your crown and become an adept. But the question he asked and was asked, where are all the jewels that should shine in that crown, which are all the souls you'll help in that time? So you can wait till the very end and you become enlightened and help no one, or you can go a little bit quicker and help others on the way. So that's the choice we have. And it's about how we live. So taking ourselves in hand, or carrying our cross, so to speak, is doing things a little bit more quickly, and therefore going to have more challenges, which is, and we're in the Kali Yuga, and we have a lot more opportunity to evolve quicker. There's a lot more challenges, which is great. And human line of evolution compared to the angelic line of evolution is very different, in the sense that the angels they admire us in the sense that we have this physical manifestation. We have lots of stuff to go through physically. They don't have the hardships we do. They have things, their evolution therefore is a little bit slower. So ours is a little bit faster by very fact of being incarnated at this level of manifestation. Okay, so all we have is a choice to act consciously or to act unconsciously. So we can be a slave of matter, or we can be a servant of spirit. And that's the only choice we have. And, the human individuality, our ego self, has its part to play. It's just how we actually live. Now, I remember Ali said in Gurdjieff's talk that he learned from his father when he was dying that he should wait 24 hours before he responds to someone if he's angry. So it's again coming back to that conscious awareness of how we behave. So, we've got this divine particle within us. It's helping us to evolve, and yet it can experience the positive or the negative within us. So, we can ultimately become self-aware. And Jesus is an example of that in terms of the link between spirit and matter, he's coming from, he's a human being who attained adeptship. So he's able to make the link between, which we'll look at a little bit later in the course, between what we are now as a more animal-focused human. So if we become son of man, we're becoming an integrated human being, which then allows us to become a son of God and be a help from above through the connection of I am, which we'll get to later in the course as well. Okay, so we're going to be touching on now, introduce a few key concepts for what we're going to be doing in the latter part of the course as well. So yoga, from the root yuj, is to unite or join together. And the definition in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras is the cessation of the fluctuations of the mind or consciousness. Because yoga for Patanjali is stilling the mind, and then there's clarity of perception and there's realization of who we really are, and therefore we can act accordingly. So Krishna's teaching in the Bhagavad Gita is in terms of teaching Arjuna, who is ourselves, to become the right actor. So Ravi is emphasizing that yoga is to teach us to become the right actor. Then we can undertake sacrifice, which will enable us to do what needs to be done. And Nisargadatta Maharaj talks about, it's not what you live, but how you live. So how we do things, it's like someone, I think Ravi or someone said about Krishnamurti, why people hung around him. They may not have understood much what he said, but they just wanted to see how he tied his shoelaces, kind of thing. It's how he actually lives, the sages. Yeah, so, and yoga is right now. We have to, do things now. There's only the now. So the second key point we're going to be looking at in the course as well is yajna, which is to make sacred. And it's quite there from the Rig Veda, yajna, or sacrifice, is the navel of the cosmos, because Krishna talks about in the Bhagavad Gita that this manifestation is a result of him, for one, but it doesn't have to do anything, yet it does act. And if it didn't act, we'd all die. Essentially, this world would fall apart, etc. Manifestation would come to an end. So the divine is making a sacrifice. So we, in turn, have to undertake sacrifice. So there's a reciprocal relationship between the gods making sacrifice and us making sacrifice to the gods. So that quote there from the Bhagavad Gita is essentially part of a larger quote which I'll read now. And it relates to the point that we're required to give because we've been given to ourselves from the one. So it's a reciprocal relationship. In the beginning, the Lord of creatures created all creatures by yajna, sacrifice, and said, by yajna may you multiply, and may yajna be the source of your abundance. By yajna may you nourish the devas, and may the devas nourish you. Thus, nourishing each other, you will attain the supreme good. Nourished by yajna, the devas will bestow upon you the joys you cherish. One who enjoys what the devas give, but does not give anything in return, is verily a thief. Action originates from Brahman, and Brahman the imperishable. Therefore, the all-pervading Brahman is ever established in yajna. So that's chapter 3, verses 10 to 15. So the one is doing what it needs to do, doesn't have to do anything, but it does nevertheless. We're here because of it. So essentially, sacrifice is at the heart of all the spiritual traditions. And ultimately, at the end of the path, and Bill's talked about that last year, the crucifixion symbolizing the Christian tradition, the individuality is no more. There's no sense of the separateness that we think we are separate from everything else. And we come to a deeper state of awareness that we're all part of the one, and yet unique at the same time, which is the paradox. The third key point that we'll be looking at as well is dharma. So the root really means to sustain. So, and this is Ravi's definition when he studies Sanskrit, is he says it's the closest, is there's many things, duty, etc., all that, but he says this is the best kind of insight or translation, understanding what he thinks it is, responsibility for the maintenance of order. Now, dharma is concerned with right action. So, in contrast to yoga, which is concerned with becoming the right act. So until we're integrated and become right, knowing, being able to act rightly and therefore undertake sacrifice, we can then do what's required in terms of Dharma. Now, there are three levels corresponding to three aspects of ourselves. So the highest, Paramatma, and there's the Jivan Atma, ourself, and then at the societal level, Manava. So now, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is confused about his Dharma, what to do, because he's a warrior and he orders, he asks Krishna, who's his charioteer, to take him between the two opposing armies, who are cousins. They're fighting over the right to the kingdom that's been taken from one family. And, he's, as a warrior, Arjuna has to protect everyone in society, the doctors, friends, family, everything. But when he comes to survey his enemies, all his friends and family are arrayed against him because there's a big split between everyone. Everyone's got ideas for revenge, etc. It's all built up through the Mahabharata, big epic, to this big battle, which is essentially symbolizing what's going to go on inside ourselves when we take ourselves in order. So ultimately, so Arjuna is confused about how to act, doesn't know what to do, because at one level he has to protect the family, and yet he's got to kill the family because they're on the enemies on the other side. He's got his individual responsibility about how to, be a good warrior, and then he's got his cosmological responsibilities that Krishna is placing on him. Because the suggestion, and Krishna tells him throughout the Gita, don't worry about killing these people. I've already killed them on the inner planes. So what's happening at the physical level corresponds to what Krishna wants to happen, the divine wants to happen at the inner level. So it's already happened. So he has to carry it out, right? Now, I think about that for myself, and then we'll think about for ourselves how we know what to do. I'm, married, we're all family, looking after our family, go to work. You've got to figure out what's right for you. Like Sisha's in India, she'll be talking about that in another month when she gets back. She's having a great time, it's fine, good. I support her and all that. For me individually, I'm doing what I need to do. I've got some quiet time at home. I'm going into myself, which is nice. And then cosmologically is this place. I've been here for 34 years. This body has been here for 34 years, and I cannot walk away from it, okay? Because they started it, and I was brought to it, and I have to be here no matter what. If someone kicks me out, I'll be here till I die, right? So it's like, this is my cosmological dharma. I have to do it no matter what. And I might upset a few apples on the way by standing up for principles, but tough luck, So this is the point. It's like different levels of dharma can be conflicting at the lower levels if you're sticking up for what is higher at a deeper level. So for me, and for those of you who've known me for many years, I stick up for principles, and that's it. I don't care about the social crap. Principles only. So that's it. And that might rock a few boats at the lower level, right? So tough luck. So this is the point that Arjuna has to come to terms with, and Krishna teaches him throughout those 18 chapters, because at the end of the Gita, he says, now you've heard what I've said, do as you wish. He doesn't tell him what to do. He has that insight where he, after all that teaching he's given Krishna and woke him up, he's very certain he'll do what he needs to do. Because that's the thing. When we're clear, like when we understand something, is something ever an issue anymore? No. So that's it. But also there's a nice little saying in the 3rd chapter, and I read this from HPB as well. She said, Krishna's rationale. It's better to follow one's own law, though imperfectly carried out, than to follow the law of another perfectly carried out. So you've got to follow your own conscience, right? Which is not always going to agree with everyone else, which is fine. So, you've got to do what you feel is right. But if we, apply these teachings, go into ourselves, then we know what to do. So, and this is the key thing. Dharma is not possible without yajna, without sacrifice. And sacrifice is impossible without yoga. So Krishna has to teach Arjuna yoga so he can become the right actor and be integrated. Then he'll be able to make a sacrifice to be able to say, okay, I can let go of my own self-interest and therefore do what needs to be done. So we have to be very strong individuals and balanced and integrated. You find people who may not be, totally together. Well, they won't be able to give up their own self sense of importance because they're not, and that's not capable of, not capable of that. So, you need to be really balanced, very integrated to be able to then consciously undertake suffering, because that's what it is. We're actually consciously undertaking giving up our own self-interest, and that's hard to do. Now, there's a couple of us here who have behavioral training in the psychology. Now, the behaviorism, which is the philosophy of science of human behavior, that says that altruism is impossible because we're caught up between being reinforcement and punishment, right? Something better, so we'll behave according to that reinforcement. Now, logically, I thought a lot about this. I don't know if you can argue against it, Barry, logically, because even the sages say, I'm awake now, it's better than when I was asleep. So you've still got that something is better, something's more reinforcing, so you're going to behave according to that. But in another sense, we're going to go beyond the opposite. It's going to go beyond reinforcement and punishment to a deeper state. It's kind of interesting. But I've never been able to. If I was a professor, I wouldn't be able to write that in a paper. I've thought a lot about it over the years, how to actually think about that argument, because logically you can apply it to any level. So. Yeah. Sorry, I was talking to you there, Barry. It's all right, mate. Now you think about it. So, like, doing one's own duty. Now, in the 1970s, there was the movie, and I think it was who was it? Al Pacino, Superco. He was a policeman. He never took bribes, and they killed him. He died for his own principles. So it's about doing what you need to do. So there's a concept called Swadharma, S-V-A Dharma, which is our own essential responsibility, which is according to our Swabhava, S-V-A-B-H-A-V-A, which is our essential nature, and then Swakarma, S-V-A Karma, our obligatory work. So this relationship there. Now, this is not to say that any mad person killing in the name of God and whatever is justified in doing that, right? So here was a couple of articles from the paper this year. Now, does anyone think that they're doing God's will? I mean, this is the whole point. So it's a very, very, what's the word? Subtle. It's hard. No one can really judge. Oh, actually, you could. If everyone started interrupting me and I couldn't carry on, then that wouldn't be right? And yet, as you go deeper in figuring out what is right and what is not right, how to act, it becomes harder. Although these are examples that show you that it's pretty obvious to figure out what is right and what is wrong. But morality, or super morality, as the Mahatmas talk about it in the Initiate series, is it's about motive and how we act. So as we there was a couple of members in the old timers in the Theosophy when I joined. I was 22, 23 up in Auckland. They fought in World War II, like World War II. One went to war and one was conscientious objector. And they're both Theosophists, right? Both had different perspectives, and they both did what they felt was right. No one could say other was wrong, So it's quite interesting. So to some level, you can say this is not right, but at deeper levels, it's much harder to fathom, and really only you can figure out for yourself what is right. But it's interesting. Ravi says, by having definite rules and regulations, we can become bureaucrats of consciousness. But if someone is in charge, if we are present, then the rules can be suspended in a particular case or applied differently. So it's having that awareness about what is right to do at any moment based on what we feel in our own conscience. Now, it's interesting in terms of some of the attributes, if you like, of what constitutes a good human being or not. And it's in chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita. And I'll just, it's basically about what are the qualities that bind us and liberate us. I'll just read you a little bit. The Blessed One spoke. Fearlessness, purity, steadfastness in the yoga of sacred knowledge, charity, self-control, yajna, sacrifice, self-study, effort, straightforwardness, non-violation, truthfulness, absence of anger, renunciation, tranquility, absence of fault-finding, compassion for all beings, non-covetousness, gentleness, modesty, stability, vigor, self-confidence. These are the endowments of one born with the divine nature. So there's all of these qualities, right? And this is in chapter 16, verse 1 to 3. Conversely, hypocrisy, arrogance, and self-conceit, wrath, as well as harshness and ignorance, are the endowments of one born with the demonic nature. So it's, quite contrast there. So on the one level, it's pretty easy to figure out. Deeper levels, it's not so easy, and that's when you really got to rely on what's in here. So I just wanted to highlight that because I can't, there's hints and these descriptions, and the same with Patanjali Yoga Sutra, he talks about, which we'll get onto. But there's no prescriptive code of behavior. Ravi says there's no particular activity that determines a wise person. It is rather the attitude and intention with which anything is done that discloses the quality of the person. So on the one hand, it could be bureaucrats of consciousness, rules and regulations, which is what the Pharisees are. Or we can go a little bit deeper and listen to something more higher or deeper than ourselves. And it's interesting, the Joy Mills, she was an American member. She was the International Vice President, General Secretary of the American and Australian section. She was a very wise woman. She's quite funny too. She said, we have to watch out for the theosophical evangelists. And I thought she said we have to watch out for the theosophical Pharisees. So, she's quite a hard case. So yeah, there's that tension between the rules and the regulations and doing what our conscience tells us. And this is our work in the TS. So altruism, who the behaviorists don't think are possible, but that's okay. And it's about doing it. We've got to do it and live it. Yoga is known by yoga. Now, this is what I found today when I was doing a bit of this afternoon, last night rather. I found a little bit more about TS and cycles. So this is what I said at the start about being here and the opportunity that we have. So this is what HPB said. It's in the collected writings, I think. The world moves in cycles, which proceed under the impetus of two mutually antagonistic and destroying forces. The one striving to move humanity onward towards spirit, the other forcing mankind to gravitate downward into the very abyss of matter. It remains with men, humans, women, to help either the one or the other. Thus, also, it is our present task as theosophists to help in one or the other direction. We are in the very midst of the Egyptian darkness of Kali Yuga, the Black Age, the first 5,000 years of which, its dreary first cycle, is preparing to close on the world between 1897 and 1898. Bearing in mind that it started 3102 BC, at Krishna's death, according to HPB. Yeah. So she mentions 1897, 1898. And she goes on to say, unless we succeed in placing the TS, this organization, before the state on the safe side of the spiritual current, it will be swept away irretrievably into the deep called failure, and the cold waters of oblivion will close over its doomed head. I mean, her words are quite striking. Thus will have ingloriously perished the only association whose aims, rules, and original purposes answer in every particular and detail, if strictly carried out, to the innermost fundamental thought of every great adept reformer, the beautiful dream of a universal brotherhood of man. So, you know, we're very fortunate to be here, and the founders worked very, very hard, and all their supporters, to keep this place afloat. Okay. So, for the next session, starting in August, which is the 6th, we have the human condition, then we have the 3 gunas, then we have Karma Yoga Part 1 of Buddha Yoga Part 2, Jnana Yoga. So that's what I've got for August. I've got September sorted as well, but I didn't have that slide when I made it. So yeah, that's it for today. Yay! Okay, I'll take the stop sharing screen. Okay. Any comments, thoughts, questions, bit of feedback? Great. I mean, I'm very happy to do this. It's taken like 7 months. I got this. I actually got a copy from the vendor that's now closed in September, and I started reading it then. It was my little summer break. And thought, well, let's do something on this, which is what I got taught by Ravi 29 years ago. He was my age, and I was like 28. So yeah, it's been nice, you know, to go into it. It's really good stuff, combining those 3 traditions. So yeah.
I'd just like to say that was a very good introduction. So I really enjoyed some of those different aspects.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, he wrote this Gospel of John in 1990. He wrote then, I think this was a little bit later in 2009, the Yoga Sutras, and then the Gita was in 2017. But it's interesting. I was like, I thought, why hasn't he done this? Because he'd done these other ones, and then one day it just popped down. He's been working on it, you know, because he's a machine. He has written so much. I mean, left and right brain, physicist and religious studies professor and philosophy, you know, philosophy department professor. It's incredible. You know, I hope if you ever see this, Rav, I hope you don't mind. He looks like the Buddha with his big Buddha ears. Have you seen the ears? Incredible. Sorry, mate. So yeah, yeah, really good. Okay, I'll stop recording and just have a chat.